Lawyers have been central to the IDF's campaign. They've actually advised them in their military operations and worked to change international law in where it applies to warfare. In fact, one of the things that they've said explicitly in regards to targeted killings is that if you constantly violate the law, you work to change it, and they were correct. Targeted killings, also known as extrajudicial assassinations, are absolutely prohibited under international law, and yet now they've been renamed targeted killings and come into a certain space of exceptionality. Now, those legal arguments I do not think would withstand scrutiny if one were to judge them. The argument, for example, right now, whether or not Israel's campaign against Hamas in the Gaza Strip is proportionate is a perfect example. In that case, it argues that everything that they're doing is proportionate to the military advantage that they're gaining, but they would be hard pressed to demonstrate how the demolition of 64 mosques, of 2 churches, of 5 hospitals and 6 clinics, the murder of 250 children is proportionate to a military campaign that they say isn't even over because they need to continue in order to destroy all the tunnels. So one would have to ask, does this necessitate the decimation and the destruction of the entirety of the Gaza Strip to be successful? That doesn't withstand scrutiny, any kind of legal scrutiny. It certainly doesn't withstand scrutiny just to the plain eye. We've seen Israel consistently try to stretch the bounds of international law, and frankly, it's been able to do so repeatedly because of a lack of accountability. Law is a product of power and politics, and without the political will that underpins the actual implementation of the law, it can be quite meaningless, as the suffering of Palestinians has demonstrated. In this campaign, what we've seen is similar to what Israel did during Operation Cast Lead, as well as Operation Pillar of Cloud, just outright onslaught, destruction, attacking civilian infrastructure, and naming it military infrastructure because it has dual purpose. And yet, under the 4th Geneva Convention, under the additional protocols to the Geneva Conventions in their totality, this does not withstand scrutiny because one should err on the side of protecting civilians as opposed to achieving the military advantage. The way that the international legal system works is that there are several mechanisms to hold Israel to account, including and foremost the UN Security Council because of its enforcement powers under Chapter 6 and Chapter 7 authority. But other venues available include the International Criminal Court, and the International Criminal Court, as Palestinians have indicated, has not been used yet and frankly will not be enough on its own. Other fora include national courts, where national courts can invoke universal jurisdiction to prosecute those crimes that are crimes not only to a particular people, but to all of humanity. These are all opportunities to redress the violations done unto Palestinians during this particular campaign, and yet each of them is subject to a lot of political considerations and a lot of politics that goes on behind the scenes, but where the U.S. is exerting its own influence in order to limit access to those venues and fora. I think that this is very likely, but it's not absolutely going to happen. The Palestinian Authority is considering making a number of considerations about what's in its best interest. The thing to keep in mind is that the ICC is not a magic box. It's one additional fora in the international system, and it's fraught with its own political considerations. I encourage the Palestinian Authority to take Israel to the ICC because it begins a campaign that scrutinizes Israel's operations and puts it on international display. This is not a case to be adjudicated behind closed doors or in courtrooms. This is a case to be adjudicated in public to the entirety of the international community, because these crimes committed against Palestinians are crimes against all of humanity. They are crimes that should not be repeated and should certainly not be justified in the name of security or in the name of any sort of military advantage to a belligerent force. This demonstrates an excessive force, especially when Israel is able to use more precision, precise targeting, and has proven that diplomatic solutions are much more effective than military ones.